Good evening, everyone. Most Venerable Srinanda Hamdaro and dear Venerable members of the Mahasangha and dear Dhamma friends. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Bhante Sirinanda for having me invited here today to share some thoughts of Dhamma with you. Um, yeah, my name is Chandananda, Kirinde Chandananda. So right now I live in Fresno, California. Yeah, I'm living at a Cambodian Buddhist temple. So conducting religious services from there. So I hope now we can start today's Dhamma discussion. Um, well, also, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to and appreciation to Venerable Sirananda Hamdro for organizing this wonderful Dhamma event for the happiness and well-being of many. And as we all believe that the among things we share, the Dhamma is the most precious thing that we can share with others. It is of, the benefit and the results we gain through the Dhamma. It doesn't last only for this life, it lasts for eons and eons. And especially at a time like this, when our life is hit by so much of suffering and adversities, it's our duty to seek true happiness and lasting happiness as well. So here tonight, I was given this topic to discuss five aggregates. Here, what I would like to do is I would like to little bit adjust this so you can have a better understanding, and therefore I would like to contextualize. Of course, I'm going to discuss and teach you what are these five aggregates. And also, I would like to contextualize these five aggregates in what context we see this, we come across this teaching, and also, and I would like to show you the distinction between the five aggregates and also the five aggregates of clinging, which we call Pancha Upadana Kanda. And actually, it is of great importance for us to see the distinction of, the difference between the five aggregates and the five aggregates of clinging. That is very essential thing. And we have this habit that we study Dhamma and we learn Dhamma sometimes outside its original context. So that kind of understanding, I don't think that it can lead us to any sort of enlightening thing or enlightening stage, or for our, it doesn't necessarily contribute for our ultimate goal. So therefore it is very important for us to contextualize all these dhammas. So in what context we come across five aggregates? Actually, we come across these five aggregates, the subject of five aggregates, in the context of Four Noble Truths, we can say, or in the Four Noble Truths, to be exact, in the first noble truth, that is the truth of suffering. So that's where we come across five aggregates. first noble truth. Then when we discuss about five aggregates in the context of Four Noble Truths, actually, then the knowledge we gain actually really helps us. It is really helpful for us to, we all are seeking liberation from this samsaric suffering, and so that knowledge, then it is not confined to a mere knowledge. Rather, it helps us overcome suffering. That's what we really need. And then the other thing I would like to do is like to show you the difference between the five aggregates, and the five aggregates of clinging. Five aggregates of clinging. That is called Upadana Kanda, Pancha Upadana Kanda. Then, first of all, let us. Excuse me. Let us see what are these five aggregates. Five. The first aggregate is called matter. And then the sensation. Then perception. Then volitional formations. Consciousness. These are called five aggregates. Matter we call in Pali Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vijnana. You might wonder as to why we really talk about these things. What is the need? What is the necessity that we talk about these things? In our life, that is true, that in our life, we don't see these five things in our lives. All we see is just one thing only. For instance, like when as we experience the world, we experience world through our senses. As we experience our world through senses, say for instance, when you see the world through your eyes, all you see is just the matter, just the form. But you forget the fact that there are five things contributing for your experience of seeing. But Buddha was able to discover what lies behind our experience. So these are the components of your experience. Like even though we experience things as seen, like form and sound, and then the taste, and then the touch, and then the form, sound, taste, touch, and then the rupa, saddha, gandha, okay, smell, and then the thoughts. As far as, in other words, as far as our sixfold experiences are concerned, here experience means the experience I mean, we experience through our senses. When the senses come into contact with the respective sense stimuli, and there is a sense contact, and through that we experience the world. As we experience the world, we experience the visual form, sound, taste, touch, and thoughts. So actually, even though they appear to us as some one single entity, actually that is not the case. There are five things functioning, five things contributing for that experience. Actually, it is not that easy for anyone to discern this reality for the first time. This is why this question was raised in the what do you call that, the debate between a venerable monk and King Venerable Nagasena and the King Milinda in the Milinda Panya. King Milinda asked this question: Venerable Sir, what is the most difficult task that the Buddha had ever done? And then Venerable Nagasena said that, well, the most difficult thing that Buddha has done is that he was able to discern these five aggregates, five things: matter, sensation, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness in our experience, the Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. In the life of ordinary people, we experience just one single thing, one single entity. But Buddha was able to discern the real true components of our experience. So then still that king was not able to get that, and he again asked Venerable Nagasena, Venerable Sir, can you give me an analogy so I can understand that? Then he said, well, it is as if like somebody is trying to identify the sea. He's trying to discern from which water source this particular water came, and from which river, from many various rivers, water come to the sea. But once it is in the sea, it is not easy. I mean, it is almost impossible for anyone to discern um, which water and sort of identify the water source, original water source. So such a difficult task Buddha has done in discerning these five aggregates in our experience. So we will be discussing this too, like and why we don't see these five things, and why it is important for us to see it. And only moment you can see these five things in our experience is when you go to understand the reality in terms of this causality, from the perspective of causality, and then only you come across these five things. Otherwise you just see things, I mean, you don't get the real picture of of the reality. You get a totally distorted picture. That is not the right picture of the reality. So but when you understand the causality, conditionality, cause and effect, yes, you have to refer to these five things, because all you see here, whatever you experience through your senses, is nothing but the constant, the function of these five things. So actually, this is a very comprehensive subject. So I don't think that within one session we can understand everything about this subject. For instance, when you want to know what the rupa is, what the matter is, you have to study the four basic matters and also the secondary derived matters, and it's a very comprehensive subject. And then matter, sensation, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. For instance, when you analyze form that you see through your eyes, you get matter, sensation, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. When you analyze sound, taste, touch, smell, and thoughts, all you see is the contribution of these five things. So then, just to mention in brief, rupa here means the matter is the four basic elements: the solidity, fluidity, heat, and motion. And there are then another 24 secondary elements, which we call upadaya rupa, or we can say derived matter. So that distinction is also very important. The four great elements and the primary elements, and also the 24 secondary elements. And then here Vedana means the sensation. Sensation can be a pleasant sensation and unpleasant sensation, and also the neutral sensation. And then the perception of form and perception of sound, taste, touch, smell, and thoughts. And then the volitional formations. It is called sankhara, volitional formation. We form. So the will is involved here. And then the consciousness. When we say consciousness, it doesn't mean that there is one particular consciousness all the time and one unchanging consciousness. Always when we talk about consciousness, we have to refer to what kind of we have to be specific what kind of consciousness we are talking about, and what kind of consciousness we are referring to. Is it either eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, tongue consciousness, or the mind consciousness? So when we talk about consciousness, it is also again a sixfold. So these are the five aggregates. And then now it is important for us to see the distinctions between the five aggregates. I think before that, if we can understand how this functions, how this works in a given experience, then we can sort of understand, kind of get an idea as to how these five aggregates functions in our real life. I hope it would be really beneficial for most of you. So let me explain to you, giving an example. For instance, in our visual experience, how these five aggregates function, so we can understand the basic of these five aggregates. For instance, now I mentioned in the beginning that in our experience, day-to-day experience, in our day-to-day life, as we perceive the world, as we experience the world, all we experience is just the form through the eyes. But this is not the right picture. This is a very distorted picture we get about the reality. So then when we analyze our seeing, the experience of seeing, we have to refer to the five aggregates. For instance, how to distinguish the components, five aggregates in our the experience of seeing. For instance, the eyes represent matter or rupa, and also the form represent matter. Both the sense and the sense stimulus, they represent together. They represent the aggregate of matter, material aggregate. And then Chakku sampassaja vedana. Chakku sampassaja vedana means the sensation born out of visual contact. That is the sensation here. And then perception, rupa sanya, perception of form. And then the rupa sanchetana, volitional formations, of form. And then the consciousness is eye consciousness. Together, the result is seen. When we analyze seeing, all we get is these five things. And you can replace this whole chart with any other sense and the sense stimulus, and then the respective sensation, and then the respective perception, volitional formations, and the respective consciousness. That's how we are supposed to analyze our experience. And then I mentioned that we need to distinguish five aggregates from that of five aggregates of clinging. There is a very subtle distinction between five aggregates and five aggregates of clinging. Now, for instance, seeing, the true reality is that seeing is just the seeing. But in our life, we have not been able to confine seeing to seeing itself. Rather, we proliferate, we make changes to it, and we edit it, and we do a lot of editing with in regard to that experience. Then we form and create an edited version of seeing. Actually, this is where suffering begins. This is why the Buddha said that suffering in the ultimate sense is nothing but the five aggregates of clinging. Five aggregates clinging means that the edited version of seeing and then we had to question, and we had to question why we edit things, and how this edited version can bring about a lot of suffering. So that we can discuss too. So in essence, it is not that easy for us to distinguish actually the original five aggregates, and then this edited version, which we call the five aggregates of clinging, because they appear to be the same, but in reality that is not the case. um, Reality is that the five aggregates of clinging is just, it has to do with the thought itself, it has to do with the mind. It doesn't have the qualities of the original version of scene. We have, that's why we refer to that edited version as papancha. So it's a proliferation, complete, like mind-made thing. So, but we tend to crave for that mind-made version of experience. Then having having crave for that, then we somehow try to relate that whole thing to the reality out there. So then as we try to make a link between our proliferation, I mean the proliferated version, or proliferation and the reality, then there is a constant the conflict, because the reality out there, it is subject to change, it is impermanence and unsatisfactoriness, and but we have a permanent identification. We hold on to it permanently, but it is I mean, we can maintain that. I mean, the proliferated version. I mean, with regard to the reality. So that's why we tend to suffer. I mean, the suffering comes to our life. So this difference, we have to understand that. The five aggregates and the five aggregates of clinging, they are completely two different things. So actually the liberation, everything, the knowledge liberation ultimately depends on that, on the distinguishing of these two. I mean, the once we understand the difference, so that very knowledge can lead you to nibbana, in other words. So for instance, um, you must be remembering in the context where a person came up to the Buddha, and he was in such a hurry that he asked the Buddha a couple of times, Venerable Sir, can you teach me the Dhamma in brief? Because I'm in such a hurry that I don't have time to that much time to spend in listening to a lengthy discourses. So please, Venerable Sir, teach me the Dhamma in very brief. There, the Buddha said, well, if you want to listen to the most concise version of the Dhamma, it is like this. Seeing is just the scene, hearing uh, and smelling and other sensations, they are just that experience, and thinking is just thinking. And if you can discipline accordingly, then you will see the reality, and you will understand the reality. So that's what the Buddha said to him. So the story says that he was able to understand the reality, because there he was able to understand the distinction of the five aggregates and the five aggregates of clinging. And then if scene is just the scene, then he was able to discipline himself not to relate the edited version of fire aggregates with the true, I mean, the real experience. So scene, he was able to limit the scene and confine the scene to scene itself. So it is very important for us to understand the distinction of fire aggregates and the fire aggregates of clinging. So as we discuss, if you have any, I mean, if questions come to you, you can ask your questions too. So the next thing we are going to discuss here is that, how to understand the conditionality of five aggregates. That's where actually we can truly understand the function of five aggregates, and that's where you can see the impermanence true, I mean, the impermanence in the true sense, and also the true delusion and ignorance we have. uh, all that becomes clear when we understand the five aggregates in the context of conditionality, because conditionality or the cause and effect is the essence of the teachings of the Buddha. That is the crux of the teachings of the Buddha. That is the heart of the teachings of the Buddha. Of course, this is what the Buddha realized in his enlightenment. What he realized was that conditionality and even the Four Noble Truths, the knowledge of Four Noble Truths, he derived from that very experience and from that very understanding of conditionality. So once we understand the conditionality of five aggregates, then you can really understand how this functions, and what is our delusion, what is our ignorance, and so forth. So before we go to that topic, I mean, the conditionality of five aggregates, if you have any question, you're welcome to ask. Give me a second.
Hambrone, someone has raised the hand.
Okay.
Yeah, can you please check it for me?
Yeah, I can take that question.
Okay, Bante, I have a question. This is Sunil. Let
Oh,
you
sure.
asking the question. My question is, in the sequence you mentioned, uh, like Rupa Vedana Sanya. So when you have an object, we go straight into Sanya, which you said we like, dislike, or neutral. How do we make that judgment? I thought that was based on our past experience, impression, sankhara, that gives you that sensation, because we make a judgment, and the perception also immediately following that. So the sequence is the question I have. How does that work? Because you go into a sensation immediately from the sensory stimuli we receive, and the sankhara or volitional action comes later. So shouldn't the volitional action leads to our likes or dislikes? That's my question.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. Actually, uh, the sankhara mentioned in the aggregates, it is not the sankhara that has to do with the sankhara like punyabi sankhara, and anenjabi sankhara, that has to do with the karma thing. Here, what this sankhara does is just the, I mean, it receives the sensation and the perception So the content of this sankhara is nothing but the sensation and the perception. That's all this sankhara can do. Otherwise, it cannot produce any karmic thing, karmically potential thing. So, pancha upadanaskandha, which we mentioned, the second, that edited version of five aggregates. From there, we actually we do karmas, and we create new karmas, and that's where we see the sankhara in terms of punyabhisankara, and aninjabhisankara. Otherwise, the function of these five aggregates here is limited to just the scene only. The contribution of all these five things is to scene only. Other than that, there is nothing more. It's just the scene only. So, in other words, this is why the Buddha talks about the Purana karma and Nava karma. This is like Purana karma. I mean, this is the result of this. We talk about Vipaka Vijnana. Vipaka Vijnana means like the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, all these sixfold consciousness. They are Vipaka Vijnanas. In the Vipaka Vijnanas, you don't see Karma Vijnana. So then, based on these Vipaka Vijnana, then you tend to create new karma. So that's where you come across this, punyabhisankara, and aninjabhisankara. So then, actually, as far as the basis of that sankara is concerned, like what is the basis? How you found a basis from which you create sankara. Now you have a permanent image of scene. Then based on that permanent image of thing, then you create new karma. This is why it is mentioned in the Abhidhamma, like when Abhidhamma tries to, when Abhidhamma explains the karma, this is how it explains, like Ruparammanang va, Saddharammanang va, Gandharammanang va, Pottabbarammanang va, Yanyang va, Pana Aramanang Arabha. So based on one particular Aramana means a perception received through your sensory experience. Now you have a permanent image. So then based on that permanent image, then you tend to create a new karma. So otherwise, a scene, if you are able to limit or confine scene to scene itself, so there you don't see any karma. So this volitional formation here, it has nothing to do with the karma. I mean, it doesn't accumulate new karma other than making, making you see.
Thank you, Hamde. Just for the closing, if you may explain if it's seeing only,
Yeah.
which means there is no sankara. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but that's true. I mean, the scene is just seen only, but in our life, we don't let it be seen only. We rather immediately we we accumulate new karma based on that. For instance, as long as you are ignorant about the conditionality, then you can't help but create new karma. For instance, if it is just the scene, suppose it was just the scene in your life, then you must be able to understand that it's gone and it cease with the breakup of the other conditions. But you can still speculate on what you have already seen. For instance, the things that you have already seen yesterday, you can still think that, oh, they must be existing out there. So as long as you have that permanent image of things you have seen, then you can accumulate new karma at any time. So that means the seeings you experienced yesterday, they were not limited to seeing itself. Rather, you left it there. You left it there like it is as if um, you know animal beings, when they go in front of a mirror, so they, even though they just cross the mirror, as they cross the mirror, they just leave the image permanently in the mirror. They don't understand that that reflection in the mirror is causally conditioned. So at any time they can speculate on that image, um, even no matter how long after, still you can speculate on that. So as in other words, as long as we are ignorant about the conditionality, so long we can accumulate any karma at any time.
Thank you.
Any other question? So now let us talk about the conditionality. Actually, to some extent, to a certain extent, we just mentioned the conditionality too, as I was answering Mr. Sunil, I think. Now, before we understand the conditionality of five aggregates, we need to understand what kind of conditionality Buddha talks about. You know, not only the Buddha, many philosophers, many scientists, they also do talk about conditionality. But it is very important for us to distinguish Buddhist causality from that of other causalities. For instance, cause and effect. Cause and effect. Now, according to the cause and effect, Buddha talks about, even though causes give rise to effect, you cannot see causes in the effect, and you cannot separate effect from the causes either. There, that's where you see the conditionality. For instance, the same example we just took. When you see something in the mirror, now for you to see something in the mirror, then what are the causes and conditions necessary for that? If we were to confine that to three necessary conditions, then we can say that object, then the mirror, and then the light. Now, we are focusing on this thing, like which is in the mirror. You know, this is really important for all of us to understand the conditionality the Buddha was referring to. Um, if we can understand this analogy and this simile, and we can understand to a great extent the nature of Buddhist causality. So, for instance, now as you see the reflection in the mirror, and if you were to analyze it, how would you analyze it? Can you say that is it the mirror itself? It is not the mirror itself either. Is it the object then, what you see in the mirror? Or is it the light? You cannot say so. But because of these three things, object, light, and the mirror, the result is, or the effect is this reflection. As far as reflection is concerned, uh, it doesn't have existence of its own on its own. It is there as long as other conditions exist. Then why I took this example and this analogy to uh, tell you that seeing or smelling or hearing, they are exactly the same as the mirror. As the reflection in the mirror. All these sixfold experiences. Now, when you analyze your experience, say for instance, you are analyzing the scene, the experience of your volitional, your visual experience. As you analyze your visual experience, you cannot say, oh, what you are seeing is just the matter. Then you are wrong. If you were to say that you are seeing is just the perception, you are wrong again. And nor can you say that you are seeing just the eye consciousness. You cannot say so. It is like as if you are trying to say that what you are seeing in the mirror is just the mirror, or what you are seeing in the mirror is again the light or the object. But you cannot say so. If you want to analyze it rightly, correctly, um, as it is, you have to say that it is the the effect, and these are the causes, and it is there as long as causes exist and the condition exists. Whenever there is a breakup of any of these conditions, it ceases to exist. So that's how we are supposed to analyze. So as you analyze that way, you avoid the notion of is. The notion of is you avoid, because Buddha said that notion of existence is one extreme, and notion of non-existence also another extreme notion. So one time Buddha said to Venerable Kaccayana that Venerable Kaccayana, this world for the most part is of these two extreme notions, the notion of existence and the notion of non-existence. Then having rejected these two extreme notions, Buddha taught the Dhamma and teach the Dhamma following the middle path. So as you analyze the Dhamma in from the perspective of conditionality, you avoid these two extreme notions, and also you follow the middle path. So for instance, when you say that if you think that what you are seeing is existing out there, then we are adhering to that extreme notion. And if you were to negate it totally, that what we see doesn't exist, You cannot say so. So it is kind of annihilism or nihilism, because you just reject it, you just ignore it, and you just negate it. So it is another extreme notion. So how you are supposed to then say, how you are supposed to explain it? You have to explain it saying that seeing is there as long as other condition exists. So seeing is the effect of those five aggregates. So then with the breakup of any of those conditions, it ceases to exist. That's how you're supposed to define, analyze your experience, any experience for that matter: visual experience, auditory experience, olfactory, gustatory, and the mental experience, all experience. Every experience you have to analyze using that conditionality. I mean, the philosophy of conditionality, or the doctrine of conditionality. Okay, I got a question here. Change, for example, if one see a luxury car passing by, if one see it only as car, it may not generate karma. But if you by seeing this car crave to have um, one for yourself, then it will cause to create karma. I hope you all got the question.
No, Bante, we can't see that question. It's probably directed to you.
Oh, okay. You want me to say it loud?
Please.
Okay, sure. So I got a question. So this question is coming from Sam. He's asking, uh, for example, if one see a luxury car passing by, if one see it only as car, it may not generate karma. But if you, by seeing this car, crave to have one for yourself, then it will cause to create karma. I think the best answer you can see for this question, if you can refer to the Dutiya Chetana Sutta of the Sanjutta Nikaya. There Buddha says that um, uh, even though you I mean the crave for things, and even though you um, speculate on things, and or if you remain unspeculating things, still your consciousness finds basis for rebecoming. So because just because you see it, and I mean the like it doesn't mean that you overcome karma. And karma happens. Karma is a very subtle thing, very very subtle thing. That's why, the chetana means the volition. So in the Dutiya Chetana Sutta, Buddha clearly mentions how we accumulate karma even by not speculating things. Like for instance, I can give you an analogy, so you can understand the distinction. Say, for instance, you take your dog to the mirror, and suppose you have three dogs, and one dog might bark at the mirror, and he might get really agitated seeing this, and he might terribly get angry and super angry that keep barking. And then the second dog, he is very friendly with the mirror, and then the reflection he sees in the mirror, and he would want to play with that. And then you take your third dog to the mirror, and he won't care, and he would just ignore it and leave. So as he passed by, but still there is one common thing for all those three dogs. Because the first one, he accumulated, we can say he accumulated like really evil karma, just having anger. And then the second one, having the greed. He accumulated another form of karma. And how about the third one? He didn't express his emotions. He didn't express his ignorance in terms of any words or deeds. But still, that ignorance was there. He take it to be something. He would take it to be. Of course, he can't help but take it to be another animal. So that is very enough for the karma, because as far as I mean, as long as ignorance is there, so long karma generates. Avidya paccaya sankara. Avidya paccaya sankara. This is why the Buddha said that avidya paccaya sankara. Because of avidya, sankara rises. I mean, that is the sankara when we talk about sankara at the ultimate level. And also in the what do you call that, in the Patisambhida Magga book, Patisambhida Magga Prakarana, if you refer to the Dhammattiti Jnana, there Buddha talks about like how subtle this sankara is, and the avidya contributes to sankara in 9 forms, in 9 ways, very subtle ways. The gross karma, accumulation of karma, is one way only. But if you have at least one nimitta, one perception, a perception of things you experience, that is a indication that you already accumulated karma. Avidya sankaranang upadattitica pavatattitica nimittattitica ayuhanattitica sanyogattitica paribodattitica hetuttitica paccayattitica paccayo hila. So that it is explained in that way that avidya contributes to sankara in 9 ways. So not necessarily in terms of the gross level, at gross level, at very subtle level, you accumulate karma. As long as you have that ignorance, so long you tend to accumulate karma. Yeah. Any other questions?
But there is a question that I think it sent to me. I try to copy and put it in the public. Give me a second.
You can read the question.
I think you can. You have access now, I think.
Bante, my question is regarding 5 aggregates. If you detach yourself from these 5 thoughts, 5 through meditation, would this be useful? You know, if we can, that would be really wonderful. But you know, if it is, yes, interesting question. Like, we don't have to detach ourselves from the aggregates. You cannot actually do anything to these aggregates, 5 aggregates. But there is one thing that you can do. You can detach, not just detachment, but if you can if you can stop that the occurring, the occurrence of aggregates of clinging, the edited version we mentioned, the proliferated version, or the distorted version of five aggregates, then that is very necessary. If you can do it, and then of course we can stay unaffected, and we can stay very peacefully, and the suffering won't touch our life. This is what the Buddha calls the end of suffering. The end of suffering, for instance, the suffering Buddha talks about, the suffering ultimately based on the five aggregates of clinging. Every suffering you experience in your life, starting from birth, aging, sicknesses, separation from the beloved ones, association with the disliked one, not receiving what you desire for, a whole mass of suffering you experience. That whole mass of suffering actually you come across within the five aggregates of clinging, not because of the presence of five aggregates. We have to get this very clear. It is not because of the existence of five aggregates you experience suffering, but because of the presence of five aggregates of clinging you experience suffering. So this clinging nature is responsible for your suffering. So if you can stop that, the five aggregates of clinging, pancha upadanaskandha, then you can overcome suffering. That is possible. So that is possible. It is for that we follow the Noble Eightfold Path. In the Noble Eightfold Path, in the right understanding or samadhi, this is what we do. We reflect on the nature, and we reflect on the experience. We reflect on the five aggregates very deeply to understand how these functions causally and conditionally. That's what we do actually in the satipatthana practices. For instance, as you practice Kayanupasana, you reflect on and deeply meditate on the conditionality about the material aggregate. And then when you practice Vedananupasana, as you practice Vedananupasana, you deeply reflect on the conditionality of Vedana and how these different Vedanas arise depending upon conditions, and how they cease with the breakup of the conditions. And then Chittanupasana, Dhammanupasana also, they are nothing but the five aggregates. So you reflect on the nature, on the conditional nature of five aggregates. Then as you practice that path, you overcome five aggregates of clinging. You overcome clinging. Yeah. There is there? Oh. Any other question? Yeah. And we got one question here. Bante, would it be all right to inquire Bante's email for further questions and reading on Patana and 12 links, please? We wish also to invite Bante for them. Patana and 12. Yeah. I hope maybe he's referring to I think my information we can obtain from Bante Sirinanda if you need any further clarification about the things we discussed. So the 12 things, 12 links. I hope you are referring to the 12 links of Paticcasamuppada. Actually, Paticcasamuppada is a very deep philosophy, very profound philosophy. And 12 links actually is yet another perspective. Only there are many other perspectives from which Buddha talk about the Paticcasamuppada. For instance, Buddha talks about Paticcasamuppada in 77 forms and 44 forms. All this you can see in the Sutta Pitaka too. For instance, in the Sanyutta Nikaya, Nidana Sanyutta, you come across different suttas about the, so many plethora of volumes, suttas pertaining to this topic. And also, if you are looking for Abhidhammic perspective on the subject, you can refer to the Vibhanga Prakarana, which is the second volume of the Abhidhamma Pitaka. And there you see Paticcasamuppada Vibhanga, which is very, very profound. So you can further clarify all your um, questions referring to those early sources. Um, and yeah, let me summarize what we discussed today, so you can have a kind of good understanding. At least, um, at least if you got an idea, like uh, there is something deep, something profound we really need to investigate into. That is very enough. Like, throughout this samsara, throughout this long journey, this journey, Buddha says that the first point of this samsara, first beginning cannot be discerned in this long journey. The journey, uh, this has been a very long journey, and there were two things that always contributed for this immense suffering, that is ignorance and the tanha. Avidya nivaranam tanha sanyojanam sandavatam samsaritam. Buddha says that we were we were blind by the ignorance, and then the covered by the tanha. That's how we just travel throughout the samsara. So in order to overcome that ignorance, then we have to understand the conditionality. And it is by the understanding about this conditionality, Buddha was able to break through the very hard shell of ignorance. So that's why the Buddha referred to the samsaric beings as um, we are like stuck in a very thick shell, um, like an egg which is having very thick layer. I mean, it is very difficult for us to break through. But Buddha, for the first time, he was able to break through this hard shell, and Buddha showed us the path. So then it is up to us to follow his footsteps, so we can break through that hard shell of ignorance. And I hope we made a simple attempt here to give you a kind of idea that yes, there is something more than we just experience. There is another, the reality that we need to refer to and that we need to reflect on. So, in other words, there is what we see is not the everything. What we hear is not the everything. What we taste, touch, and thing is not the everything. In our world, we mostly we are likely to get a distorted image of the reality. So, as rational beings, it is necessary that we look into, investigate into that components of our experience. And then as we understand the components, then we have to understand the conditional genesis, I mean the conditionality of experience. So then as we understand the conditionality of experience, then we understand that things are impermanent. Impermanence now, for instance, we can understand impermanence and talk about impermanence at different levels. At conventional level too, we can talk about I mean the impermanence. But mostly the error here is that we try to understand the impermanence of a thing which is existing. I mean we already believe in things which are existing. At the same time, we are trying to understand the impermanent of existing things. But as we refer to something as existing, then actually we are beyond that understand. I mean, we are not close to that understanding of impermanence. So the true way, the right way to see the impermanence is through the understanding of the conditionality. That way you understand that nothing exists on its own, nothing exists intrinsically, independently. So everything we experience is dependently arisen phenomenon. It is dependent upon other conditions. So seeing is not one particular, the entity. Hearing is not one particular entity. There are other components that have contributed for that experience. For instance, when we analyze the scene is because of the presence of eyes, because of the presence of form, because of the presence of sensation, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, the result is seen. And then the same as you analyze the auditory experience, olfactory, gustatory experience, and all sixfold experiences. So in the end, you see nothing but the function of phi aggregates, constant function of phi aggregates. So then, if you can understand this cause conditionality, you can stay unidentifying with that. Suffering start as you try to stay identifying these phi aggregates. Because of the ignorance about the conditionality, you tend to identify yourself with matter. You try to identify yourself with sensation. But then you here, as you understand the conditionality of these five aggregates, you understand it is ignorance that if we were to relate ourselves to these five things, because they are constant, in a state of flux, in a state of, the always impermanent. They don't have a permanent existence, independent existence. They are, the causally conditioned things. So, and also you understand that if you were to identify yourself with that, so as matter changes, you have to suffer accordingly. And if you were to identify yourself with the sensation, you understand that sensation is nothing, something, it's not something that you can stop and keep holding on to. Sensation, whether it is pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, it is causally conditioned. For instance, now, when you feel, when you experience painful experience, now you suffer and you take it personal, to be personal. And then as you experience painful experience, you become unhappy, and then you add the mental pain over your physical pain, and you create mental pain or your physical pain. The same with the pleasant sensation. When there is a pleasant sensation, you add your mental, the delightness over that. Then you somehow try to create a permanent identity. Then, but you soon understand that no matter how hard you try, you cannot hold on to that because they are not permanent. But whereas you have permanent identity, but in the reality there is no such permanent independent identity. They are causally conditioned things. So actually, it is in this particular context we talk about these five aggregates. Otherwise, I mean the just the knowledge of five aggregates, I don't think that we it is I don't think that it is useful for our I mean the practice. But if we understand the five aggregates in the context of first noble truth, and then of course in the context of four noble truths, and also in the context of dependent arising or the conditionality, then that knowledge actually help us overcome the suffering we experience in our life. Not only the suffering we experience in this life, but the suffering we have been experienced throughout this samsaric journey, and we can successfully put an complete end to this suffering as we understand the conditionality of five aggregates. So with that, I hope we can conclude. If you have any um, final questions, we can. I have no problem in answering to. Ante Sirinanda, how you want me to like there?
Yeah, Bante, if you have a couple minutes, please
Okay.
answer these questions.
And there is one question. Um, okay, Bante, my question is: does an Arihat experience sensation as the dislike or neutral, of course, without any attachment? Hmm. Uh, I hope everyone heard the question. Did everyone?
Yeah, it is visible to everyone.
Okay. Mm, yes. Um, Sensation as like and dislike are neutral. I would say arahants, they experience pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, and neutral sensations because that is quite natural. There is a natural aspect of that sensation. Sukha Vedana, Dukkha Vedana, Adukkama Sukha Vedana. But the interesting point is this, that arahants are able to maintain equanimity with regard to pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, and neutral sensation. So this is why it is mentioned that arahants are said to have sixfold equanimity. Um, Sixfold equanimity, because they have equanimity with regard to the visual forms they experience through the eyes, and then with regard to other sixfold experience, they are able to maintain that equanimity. That equanimity is because of their understanding, I mean realization of the reality, that is natural, that equanimity is naturally dawn in their lives. Otherwise they don't make any effort to maintain that equanimity. For instance, in our lives, we had to make an effort to maintain equanimity. But as far as arahants are concerned, they don't make effort to maintain equanimity. Their life, uh, their life is well established, rightly established on equanimity, seeing the reality as it is. So yeah, because the even in the case of arahants, we still talk about the aggregates there, but what is absent there is the function of five aggregates of clinging. Mm. This is why we distinguish the I mean the nibbana in two stages: the anupada parinirvana and also that is what we call klesha parinirvana, and also kanda parinirvana, which happens at the end of that lifespan, or the end of the lifespan of that five aggregates. So as long as there exists that five aggregates, then that life, it is quite natural. When your body is touched by soft something, it generates soft sensation. It is not something that there is no doer behind that action. It is causally conditioned thing. But in our case, we take it to be uh, personal, permanent, or something pleasurable. But in the case of arahants, they understand that it is naturally causally conditioned thing. So, but they are able to maintain that equanimity with regard to all, regardless of the taste of the sensation. They are still able to maintain that equanimity.
But if we don't have any more questions, shall we conclude the session?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have another, actually our daily Buddha Vandana at 8:30. Go ahead.
Uh, Thank you, Bante, very much for having us invited here to share some thoughts of Dhamma with you all. And I wish you all good health, happiness, and the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bante. And we also really appreciate your presence this evening. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you, Bante, and thank you all for coming this evening.